Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and how are you guys doing? This is a very important lecture about the preserved Quran, the preservation of the Quran, protected book. And what I'm going to try and do, inshallah, in this webinar is I'm going to try and go through all of the controversies and all of the solutions to the controversies. So what you should be aware of now, we should have a good kind of understanding of the main controversies that relate to the Quran being preserved and how to deal with those. Now, obviously, from an Islamic perspective, we have "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." So, chapter 15, verse 9, that we have certainly sent down the book, and we will be its guardian. It's a theological tenet of our belief to believe that the Quran is preserved. Now, obviously, before I continue, since this will be quite educational, hopefully, what I request from those who are listening, as I usually do if you follow my webinars, is if you're taking notes to make sure that they're organized so that you can refer back to them, because we are going to be putting a lot of heavy machinery on the table. We are going to be going through some things which I suspect many people listening to this will not grasp in the first instance. So in order to ease and facilitate the educational process, make sure that it's not a passive learning, because a lot of the stuff we are going to be covering is not easy to understand that. So we'll start with the basics though. I mean, so the first thing you're going to be writing is what we're going to be covering. You don't have to put all of this down, but the first thing we're going to be talking about are the key areas of controversy. When I say controversy, we're talking about difference of opinion, both within Islam and outside of Islam. So what Muslims are in controversy with each other, and what non-Muslims will say in order to potentially say that the Quran is not preserved. So we have to know what kind of controversy we're talking about. And then we're going to go in chronological order. So from Prophet Muhammad until the companions, and then the Mus'haf at the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and the Argumentic Codex, and some of the objections. And then we're going to go into the discussion of what are the ahruf and what are the qira'at, some of the main opinions. We're going to be focusing on At-Tabari's view, and we're going to be thinking about the view that has the greatest explanatory scope, and I'll add here the lowest burden of proof as well. And that's, I mean, when you're making an argument, you always want to make an argument with the lowest burden of proof and the highest explanatory scope. That's usually what you want to do. But it's not only that because you're trying to make an argument and win the argument, it's that which has the lowest burden of proof and the highest explanatory scope is usually that which is the most sophisticated or most correct answer to whatever it is we're trying to find. So we're going to be talking after that about the primacy of the oral tradition, and then we're going to have questions. The last time I tried to do this, I did have a serious migraine. I suffer from and have suffered from migraines for years now. Something internal within the brain, and so I could go through this properly. So this hopefully will give me a chance to go through this with you. Now this is the areas of controversy. Okay. In terms of so you've got 10 qira'at. We're going to talk about what those qira'at are. Okay, you've got 10 qira'at, which are 10 ways of accessing the Quran. There are 10 ways of accessing the Quran, and we access the Quran through what you call the recitations, the qira'at. And the qira'at are named after the main, if you like, recitational masters, who taught their students. Okay, so if you read Quran now, you're likely to read in Hafs and Asim. Okay, Hafs and Asim is a riwayah, which means Hafs is a student of Asim. Okay, Asim is this individual, okay, who was the master of qira'at of his time. There is 10 major masters, but actually more than 10, but that we use now in the Muslim world to access the Quran. You see, when we're accessing the Quran, we don't just open the book and try and read. We access it through a normative recitation. And so there are 10 normative reciters, yes, the main masters of qira'at, and this is what we can consider the Quran. So this is the way in which we access the Quran. Now the question is, first question, is there variation? This is a very important question. Is there variation when it comes to the 10 qira'at? The answer is yes. Second question, what kind of variation is there? Okay, so these are two very important questions. Listen carefully. Yeah? Number one question, is there variation? Question mark. Answer, yes. Yes. We'll answer how, and we account for this variation. But number two, what kind of variation is there? That's the second question. So the first question was, is there variation? We said yes. What kind of variation is there? We're going to cover that. Okay. Now, within the 10 normatives, within the 7, there were 7, and then it was expanded by Ibn Jazari into 10. Normative readings, yes, you have words which are either or. So, for example, when we recite Quran, everyone who's listening to this should know Surah Al-Fatiha. So we say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, until the end of the surah. Within the 10 readings, there are 2 ways of reading the word Malik Yawmiddin. So the word Malik here can either be read as Malik, or it can be read as Malik. You see, these are 2 different ways of reading this particular word. Okay, so it can be Malik, which means the owner, or Malik, which means the king. Now, so within the 10 different readings, yeah, the only difference that you're going to find in terms of words in Surah Al-Fatiha is in one word, and that word is Malik and Malik. Now, the question is, okay, Surah Al-Fatiha is quite a small surah. What if we ask about the whole Quran? Listen carefully. What about the whole Quran? How many differences and variations are there in the entire Quran throughout the 7 major readings? Now, Ibn Mujahid, who's a classical scholar, one of the most leading names, obviously existed about 1,000 years ago, and he wrote a book called Kitab Sab'a fil Qira'at. And he says that there are 700 places, around 700 words which have variants. Yes, 700 words. That's what he says. So within those 7 normative readings, there are 700 words. What kind of readings are we talking about? What kind of differences? Like Malik, which means owner, and Malik. Do these differences have a narrative altering implication? The answer is no. It doesn't change the stories of the Quran. It doesn't change, and I'll say this tentatively, the second part, the creed of Islam. There are some of them which have an implication on creed, which I'll explain to you which ones they are throughout this webinar, but they don't have a narrative changing implication. We're talking about 700 words. Now, in my correspondence with one of the, I'm not going to call him an Orientalist, he's actually an academic. Okay, his name is Van Putin, and I had a correspondence with him. He's seen this leading manuscript editor of the West. And I actually told him this. I said, 700 words, and that can be explained, as we're going to come to, through the ahraf, and so on and so forth. And I can actually read out to you what he said. Now, this is not Jay Smith or David Wood, who is an ultra-crepidarian, who has no formal training on this. This is someone who's at least got some sense of the Islamic sciences, non-Muslim. This is what I said to him, and I can use this on my Twitter, right? So I said to him, look, about this. I said, but this would only apply if the 700 words, so there was a conversation here going on. 700 words, Ibn Mujahid, which is called Ikhtilafat Farshiyya, which is Farsh in the Qira'at Ulum means where the meanings change, and Usul means where the pronunciations change. And we'll talk about the difference. The 700 odd words in the Khilafat Farshiyya tables as around, out of 77,000. Now, there's 77, I want to say this, 77,000 words around in the Quran. Now, what's 700 out of 77,000? Less than 1%, yeah? So I said, from Fatiha to Nas. What you're saying, so he was saying something before, is totally in line with that traditional view. Pay attention to what I'm saying. What am I saying is that those 700 words, bear in mind, I'm saying this to not someone who's on my side. No, I'm saying this to an Orientalist. It's actually public record. I said, look, these 700 words is in line with the traditionalist view. What did he say? He said, I agree. I've seen that number 700 before, and it seems low. Did some back of the envelope calculations and would think it's about double that number. Okay, let's go with it. Yeah. Still only, he says, still only a tiny percentage of the words that is actually disagreed upon though. So he agrees. But he says with one caveat, let's say it's 1,400, it's about double. Now, if you guys have written essays, I'm sure many of you people have written essays, yes? You have written essays, or you have read blogs and you have read articles and so on and so forth. Well, those individuals who have done that, what is 700 words in English? What is 700 words? What is it, about an A4 paper and a half? Like 1.5? Are we talking about 2 A4 papers? Let's say 2,000 words, like what Van Putten was saying, 1,500. About maybe 2 A4, 2 A4, yeah? Maybe 3 A4. Okay, 5, 6, 7. What's the problem? You're telling me that in 23 years, okay, this is what I'm saying. In 23 years, and this is the claim, the traditional claim, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it came to select words, he couldn't say Malik and Malik, for example, yukadhibun, yakdhibun, fatathabbatu, fatabayyanu, which means very similar things. You wouldn't even translate it differently. That's how bad. Check it, or how would you even translate that differently? Tathabbatu, tabayyanu, very similar. 500, 600, 700 words, 1,000 words, 2,000. How long will it take you to read 1,000 words? How long? Take you 20 minutes? Maybe less, maybe 10 minutes, honestly, if you read it quite quick. So you're telling me 10 minutes of speech couldn't have been said over 23 years? Basically, the controversy, and this is the point here, guys. The controversy, okay, one of the main areas, so the question is there a controversy? The answer is yes. One of the main areas of controversy is to do with the variants. Write this down. To do with the variants. Question 1, are there variants? Answer is yes. Question 2, what kind of variants? We're talking about variants which don't have a narrative altering implication, but they are differences in words, both of which we uphold as Quran and as speech of Allah and so on. So this is what we're talking about. Now, there's a secondary layer of controversy. And what did we say? We said throughout the canonical text, the normative readings, that's one layer of controversy. Are there differences and variances? The answer is yes. Now the question, a secondary question, and this is important, very important. Are there variants outside of the Uthmanic script? In other words, do we find manuscripts? Do we find manuscripts and palimpsests and different material which has completely different consonantal structures and completely different words before and after, omitted, included, or from that which we have of the Uthmanic text? That's the second question. Because the Uthmanic text, the 10 qira'at can be read through them. But sometimes you have manuscripts that are not Uthmanic and that have different kind of words in them, word order. And the question is, can they sometimes be different? I mean, this is an important question. This is a very important question. The answer is yes. For someone to argue, a Muslim to argue, that no, all of the manuscripts are the same, this is a foolish argument, with all due respect. And by the way, not only is it a foolish argument, it's not even an Islamic argument or one that we need to defend. And this shows you the weakness. And I have to say, it's not our fault. It's not the fault of the Orientalists and the disbelievers and the David Woods and the J. Smiths. It's not their fault. It's our fault that we don't look into our own tradition and realize what it's actually saying. The question is, number 2 question, very important. Are there differences outside of the Uthmanic text? Answer is, what am I saying? Yes, there are. I'm not saying there isn't any difference. So there are differences outside the Uthmanic. Yes. And such differences are even documented. Listen carefully. They're even documented in the hadith. There's hadiths of, for example, Abu Darda saying, I don't say وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنْثَى وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى, I say وَالذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنْثَى. It's a hadith. So we recite in Surah Al-Layl, chapter 92, وَمَا خَلَقَ. But Abu Darda, who was one of the companions, he doesn't recite وَمَا خَلَقَ. He recites وَالذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنْثَى. How do you explain this? How do you explain the fact that the manuscripts where it says وَصَلَاةُ الْعَصْرِ or Salat al-Asr, it says, you know, Salat al-Wusta, and then it says Salat al-Asr in there. How can you explain that? How can you explain that? This is the question. Because if you're someone in the beginning of this that doesn't even recognize the controversy, then you will not be able to recognize the way in which our tradition, Islam itself, solves these controversies. Naam. Yes. So the two questions that we started with. Are there variants? Yes. What do we say? What does the tradition say about the variants? The tradition says that the Prophet recited it like this, and the Prophet recited it like that. He recited Malik, he recited Malik. How many words are there different? Ibn Mujahid says 700. Van Putten, who's meant to be expert, non-Muslim expert, says no, it's about double. No problem, double, treble, quadruple. 10 times, no problem, even 7,000. Has it got a narrative altering implication? No. So far we're following. Are there differences? Yes. Are there differences outside of the Uthmanic text? Answer is yes. How many are there? So this is actually quite good because Brother Nazir Khan, I was reading this, he's got actually probably one of the best things I've seen in the English language. It's actually on Yaqeen. Yes, there's controversy here on Yaqeen, but this article is good. I can vouch for this article. It's one of the best on the whole website. And you can see it on the bottom. And he shows, he shows, quoting someone else, Muhammad Tahsan, who says that now outside the manuscript, how many variants are there with the Sahih narration? He says 19. So we've got 700 from Ibn Mujahid, and you have 19 outside the manuscript. This is nonsense. This is how I mean, this is minor. 19 words, 19 differences. This is not a monster. Now we're going to come to how not the Orientalists, because by the way, most Orientalists won't do this. It's the evangelists. Yes, the evangelicals and the evangelists and those individuals, they make it out to be a monster. The Orientalists, they're not what you think they are. I mean, some of them, non-Muslims, they're not like what you think. I swear. It's just, when you have conversations, they'll agree with a lot of what you have to say. The traditional narrative, they will agree with it. And you know, it's not as stark and dark as many people make it out to be. It's not like that. So, what kind of differences? 700 according to Mujahid, and 19 outside of the manuscripts. How do you account for those differences outside the manuscript? Now, we're going to talk about that today. But that's an important question, which you're not going to get an answer to right now. You're going to get an answer to maybe in 5 or 10 minutes time. So you have to listen, pay attention to this, right? But before we talk about that, which is the meat, let's talk about the basic history. Okay, so we believe as Muslims that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he got the divine revelation from Jibreel, and then he transmitted it during prayers, during this, during that, many different things, and he would continually. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it wouldn't be the case that he would just recite one surah at one time. He would recite it many times in prayers, in Taraweeh, in this context, in that context, in many different contexts. You see, but he would recite these things. The Prophet asked the companions to recite in front of him. Now, how do we know that? Because as we're going to come to, the Prophet Muhammad, the companions used a very important word, aqra'niha. Yeah, aqra'niha is that the Prophet taught us this way. Yes? Can't say that they were making it up themselves. The Sahaba were not making it up themselves. The Sahaba were not making it up themselves or using whatever words they want. If that was the case, why are you using the word aqra'niha? Which means that they were the angel, sorry, that the Prophet ﷺ, he was teaching me. Sorry, this is what the word means. This is what the word means. So once again, there's a claim out there that the companions would put in whatever word they want. No, they wouldn't. Sorry, they wouldn't do that. And there's no evidence of this, in fact. And there was no ibaha or allowance of that. I don't agree with this. Because if that was the case, how come the Prophet Muhammad the companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the famous hadith of Hisham ibn Hakim, and Hisham ibn Hakim himself, and Ubay, and many of the companions would use the word aqra'niha, that the Prophet taught us this way. Yes, he taught us exactly like that. Moreover, the companions, when they used to be in prayer with one another, and some of them made mistakes, other ones would correct them. If you could just read it willy-nilly, whatever way you wanted to, there would be no correction. Sorry, there would be no correction. There'd be no istinkar for qira'ah. There'd be no way to do istinkar. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Sorry, it doesn't make sense. So here it's very clear that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he taught it to the companions. And the companions, they taught it to each other. Now, why is it that some companions, they read it in one way and then they did istinkar of the other way? Meaning what? Meaning that they said it wasn't like this. And there are narrations like that. So, it's like Abu Darda I just mentioned to you. The difference between the two. It is because of the ahruf, and that's very important that we're going to go through this. But the ahruf tell us, and this is very important, that the Quran was always a multi-formal text. It was a multi-formal, it was not a fixed text. And these key words, by the way, guys, you should have a glossary, and you should be writing those key words in the back of your glossary, inshallah, because they're going to come in handy when you have conversations to individuals that are questioning the preservation of the Quran. And believe me, by the end of this webinar, I promise you one thing. All of the major contentions about the Quran and the preservation of Quran, they will be resolved. They will be resolved. And it might sound like a brave statement or a confident statement. Yes, but I tell you something. So long as what I bring forward to you is A, from the tradition, and B, has the explanatory scope, then khalas, with all due respect, nobody can come to us and tell us about the preservation. No one can come to us and talk to us about that. So yes, we talked about he urged the Muslims to make it a central part of their life. It was part of the culture. It was part of the culture. It wasn't just something that was locked up in books or this or no. This was recited in prayers. How many times we pray? How many times we pray a day? Taraweeh, supererogatory prayers, additional prayers, voluntary prayers, tahajjud. Where the Quran talks about people praying for 2/3 of the night. What were they praying with for 2/3 of the night? One small surah? I doubt that that was the case for the majority of Sahaba. Yes, some people might have repeated the same thing, but not more. If you're going to spend 2/3 of the night, or 1/3 of the night, or 1/2 of the night praying, what are you going to be praying with? Clearly, this is a staple part. You weren't writing it down. For the most part, these people were memorizing, which we're going to talk about. And of course, there are many different things in the Quran and in the Sunnah which encourage the practice of memorization, which was something the Arabs were doing anyways, memorizing things, poetries, and so on. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have certainly made the Quran easy for reminder and remembrance, meaning hifz as well, for who is going to be the one who does it. And the many hadith that says that the more you know Quran, faqra wa taqi, you're going to be, being read and ascend. These are encouragements to the Muslims of that particular community to memorize the Quran. So clearly, it wasn't just the case though that they memorized. They also wrote it down. And we know that. There's many ahadith on that. I don't even need to mention them to you. And the Arabic context, as I've just mentioned, is a context where the Arabs were just memorizing everything. They were memorizing everything, memorizing this. It's not an iPad generation, phones and this. No, it wasn't like that. Okay, so the Arabs, okay, were known for their poetry that they would do. And by the way, this is even mentioned in the Quran, like the fact that the Arabs were like that. In Surah Al-Shu'ara, chapter 26 of the Quran. You know, that do you not see that these poets are in every valley praising and so on and so forth? وَأَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ, and they do what they don't, they say what they don't do and this and that. So these poets are everywhere. They're commonplace. And people are listening to them. They're entertainment. And they would, instead of videoing it or recording it as we do today, they would memorize what they say and go back to their families and they'd all talk about what they have. That's how they recorded information. This is what you have to understand at that time. Now we record. How do you record? By putting on your camera on your smartphone. But back in the days, they recorded by putting on their internal camera, their brains. And they would memorize the information in their hearts of these poets. And they'd come back and speak to their families about it. So this is something which is part of the thick description, if you want to call it that, of that particular culture. Now, this question of who memorized the Quran, there is a hadith that says 4, but it's not just 4, and we know from the plethora of ahadith that people have memorized the Quran in Yemen, and the Hafad were killed and so on and so forth. So it wasn't just 4 individuals that just memorized the Quran. It's a waste of time interrogation. And even if there were 4, as the Orientalists and others claim, if it's only 4, these are the 4 that, according to this view, which is not correct, yes, the 4 that memorized the whole thing, according to this view, which is not correct. But then it wouldn't discount the fact that there are people that knew chunks of it and they could put it together. There were thousands of Sahaba. So you see, these are some of the names of people who have memorized the Quran. It's not just the 4 that people say that they think there is. So of course, going just in terms of the basics here, a year after the Prophet Muhammad's death, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq ordered that Mus'haf be collected, and he put it after the Battle of Yamama. And this battle, a lot of the Hafad, the people who had memorized the Quran, as we've said, many of them had died, which means that there was more than 4, right? And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq assigned Zayd ibn Thabit, who was one of the people who memorized the Quran, to accomplish this mission. So they came together and they put the Mus'haf together, the continental skeleton and so on and so forth, and they gave it to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who put it underneath Hafsa's bed, and it was there. So we had a Mus'haf, which is a book of an entire Quran, only 1 year after the Prophet Muhammad's death. But of course, at his time, there were parchments and other things, which shows you that even though the Arabs had such a good memory and at that time, and they memorized it, it wasn't just through the memorization of the people, it was also written down. So the Argumentic Codex. So we're going to talk about the Ahruf a little bit later, and how could it be, one of the questions I started this webinar with, that you can have something which is outside the Codex. How can you have something different to the Codex? Okay, but before we talk about that, this is an important question, did the Codex form in the first place? So the Codex formed through a lejna, a committee, which was put together at the time of Uthman ibn Affan, and it had in it people like Zayd ibn Thabit, who was there obviously at the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and other names that you can see down there. But this was a committee of the most proficient people of Quran, people that had met the Prophet, heard it from the Prophet, directly from him, and then they wrote it down into different codices. Question: have any of those codices survived? Answer: no. What you find now with the Topkapi and manuscript and the palimpsest in Sana'a and this and that, none of this is what we're talking about when we say it's the 5 or 6 or 7 masahif that Uthman had actually written with his hand and so on and so forth. This is a poor way of arguing. What did you say? I said this is a poor way of arguing. We never made the claim in the first place that such masahif A survived or B need to survive, and those people who do make that claim from the Muslim side, that's a poor claim, because historical details will show us that some of the most early manuscripts that we have, they're not actually right from the time of Uthman ibn Affan. They're first century. They're very, very early, extremely early. Like the Topkapi manuscript is 99% folios, and it's in line with what we know. Yes, but it's not at the time. Uthman didn't write that with his hand. Do we require that Uthman wrote the thing with his hand in order for the Quran to be preserved? No. When we're talking about preservation, we are not talking very clearly about manuscript preservation. Let me be very clear here. When we are talking about the preservation of the Quran, let me be very clear. We are not talking about manuscript preservation. We are talking about the preservation of a spoken recitation from Fatiha to Nas, from chapter 1 to 114 of the Quran. And before someone comes in and says, well, Ibn Mas'ud, he didn't believe in Falaq and Nas was part of the Quran, but he was there at the time of Uthman ibn Affan. How comes he didn't object to the fact that that was put into the codex? And not only is that the case, but how comes all of the asanid and the chains of narration, they go back to Ibn Mas'ud, Hafs and Asim, and Abu Rahman al-Surmi, and Ibn Mas'ud. So he changed his mind. Yes, there is narration where Ibn Mas'ud first didn't believe Falaq and Nas were part of the Quran. But clearly after that, as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentions, he changed his mind. He was confused in the beginning, and then he changed his mind, which shows you that no one is perfect. But that people came together, and all of the companions came together, and they said, this is Quran. And this was then transmitted to the next generations, and so on and so forth. So we can safely assume that the manuscripts that we have, some of them would be a copy of those copies, you see, of the Uthmanic Codex, not actually the Uthmanic Codex in itself. That's not what we're arguing. Be very clear. We're not arguing that preservation of Quran means preservation of manuscripts. We are talking, and I'll tell you what we mean by preservation of Quran. Very important. Yes? Next. So what they did was they had the Quran. They said, okay, this is what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. At that time, there was no dots and tanqeed or diacritical marks, tahriq. Yeah, there wasn't any of those things there. So there was the skeleton, the consonantal skeleton. It was there, but it could facilitate sometimes more than one word, which is very important. So the consonantal skeleton can, and that's a key word you might want to put into your glossary. It can facilitate more than one word. Okay. Why would it need to? We'll talk about that in what follows. All other copies were burnt. And this was just to try and ensure that there was one standard copy and others were not allowed. So there was no confusion. There was no confusion. So clearly there's no doubts here. Because if all of these people are coming together and agreeing, all Sahaba agreeing, this is what we heard. And we don't see of any, yes, listen, we know that there was fighting before this happened. Adrik ummatik, yeah? Or Adrik ummatik. Uthman al-Affan was said, go and sort out your ummah before they become like Jews and Christians who differed in their book. So quickly sort it out, because this one's reciting in this way and this one's reciting in that way. But when the Grand Master Sahaba of the Quran came together and all agreed this is the Quran, there was no doubt afterwards. We don't hear of any narrations of Sahaba fighting each other thereafter. Fighting each other, say you don't read like that and you don't read like that. Khalas. The job has been done after this time. We do find narrations, and this is what we're going to come to, the extra manuscript evidence and extra narration evidence. Why is there, if it's true that the Quran is only what Uthman allowed and so on and so forth, how come we find things outside and Sahaba even reading with their hafs afterwards? That's different story. We're going to come to it. We're going to come to that. Yeah. So this is the oldest mushaf that I think we have. It's I'm not an expert on manuscripts, quite frankly, and IslamicAwareness.org has got some really interesting pictures and details of manuscripts. This is the one, the top copy one with 99% folios, and it's from the 1st century. It's not Uthmanic, but it's probably a copy of our Uthmanic script. As you can see here, it's the continental skeleton is exactly what we have now. But this is for us, it's additional. It's not something which is asli. It's just an additional thing. We don't use it. As if there was no manuscript on the earth, if this one didn't exist, the Quran would still be preserved. Okay, and I want you to understand that. Put that in your mind. All right, so some objections now. Some say, well, are there some verses which were lost? And so, for example, in Musnad Ahmad, it mentions that Aisha relates that when Prophet Muhammad suffered the agony of death, he got busy looking for him. Her pet animal came in and ate the paper that contained some of the verses, and some of 10 rada'at, you know. But it's just to say that Aisha herself is the only person who knows the Quran. This is a very weird interrogation here, if you think about it. But we have to remember that there were some verses in the Quran which were abrogated. ما ننسي من آية ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسيها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها. Chapter 2, verse 106. Some verses used to be part of the Quran, and Allah removed this. And she herself believed in that abrogation of those verses. And there are ahadith and narrations to that point. So it's important to realize that there are some verses that were part and then they were removed from the Quran. Yes, and Allah mentions this in the Quran. He mentions this in the Quran. So abrogation, al-nasakh, is an important part. When was all the abrogation finished? Fil ard al-akhir. When before the Prophet ﷺ died, Angel Gabriel came to him and he read the Quran to him twice and so on. And so that last rendition was that which remained. The last rendition. There were some verses, because we believe in abrogation, which were part of the Quran, then removed. ما ننسي من آية أو ننسيها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها. Chapter 2, verse 106. Therefore, this is explained within the apparatus. Yes, the apparatus, the mechanisms of the Quranic structure already. So if someone comes and says, well, some verse is lost or this and that, say, listen, this verse was abrogated, this particular narration, and Aisha herself believed in the abrogation. So that's one important or one common objection. So we talked about this already. Objection to Ibn Mas'ud. They say, well, he didn't believe. There's a narration that says he doesn't believe Falaq and Nas were part of the Quran. We say, yes, he didn't at first, but he clearly changed his mind because his narrations of the Quran include Falaq and Nas. We have narrations with his name in it, which include Falaq and Nas. How do you explain this? How do you explain this? Hafs and Asim is narrated Hafs and Asim, and then An Abu Rahman al-Sulami and Ibn Mas'ud. And he was alive at the time of the legend of Uthman. Uthman didn't take these two surahs out. Therefore, maybe in the beginning he thought, you know, this was not part of the Quran, it's just dua. And then after he realized, yes, actually part of the Quran. So the fact that he's in the chains of narration destroys and eliminates all of the claims of the individuals who say, look, you know, look at this, he didn't believe it was part of that. And he brings you a hadith from Bukhari or something like that. Say yes, but he changed his mind. So now let's get to the juice of it. Let's get to the juice of it. What are the ahruf? What are the ahruf? Before we get to what exactly are the ahruf, number one, and you should be taking your notes here. You should be taking your notes here and being very careful. Yes. Saying what this is what you're going to write on top of the page. What are the ahruf? You're going to underline it with 2 lines. You're going to underline it with 2 lines. And then you're going to write down the textual basis of ahruf. So let's read this hadith together. Umar ibn Khattab reported that I heard Hisham ibn Hakim reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way that was different from how I recited it and how it was taught to me by the Messenger of Allah. Aqra'niha, peace and blessings be upon her. This is the word that we talked about. He taught it. It wasn't just something he heard, or he can put whatever words he wants into it. No. Aqra'niha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, I was about to argue with him. Yani I was about to take him, really. But then I waited until he finished and I tied his shirt around his neck, because Umar al-Khattab was no joke. See, if you can read the Quran whatever way you want, what are you talking about? Why is Umar doing that thing? Why is he taking his shirt and wrapping it around his neck? I mean, are you being serious? You can read it wherever way you want. How come he's taking the shirt and neck and moving him and took him to the Prophet Muhammad? See how delicate they were and precise they were. It wasn't that he was reciting a different surah altogether. It was just some differences. And he said, wait a minute, why is he reciting it like this? Is this guy trying to mislead me? Is this guy trying to is he trying to change the Quran? That's how he was thinking. So he said, you know what, I'm going to wait for him to finish. And then he grabbed him. And he put him in a hold. Maybe some kind of chokehold, Allahu A'lam. He tied his shirt around his neck. Sounds like some kind of collar chokehold to me. Maybe I don't know, subhanAllah, Umar was a big man. He's a strong man. I don't know how he did this. You know, and he wasn't just playing around. He said, I said, indeed, I heard this man recite in a way that was different from what you taught me. He went to the Prophet. He's in front of the Prophet now. He's asking him. He said, look, it's different. The Prophet said to me, bring him to me. He said, bring him. Then the Prophet said to him, recite, Iqra. Then he recited, and the Prophet said, listen, هكذا أنزلت. It was revealed like that, actually. And then he said, Amar, you recite. And then he recited it. And then he said, هكذا أنزلت. It was recited like that as well. Yes, it's like that and it's like that. So wait a minute, how could it be like that and like that? And then the Prophet gave the answer. Wait a minute, how? He said, as it has been revealed. Verily the Quran has been revealed in 7 dialects. Recite whatever of them which you will find easy. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So the Quran, there's some verses, there's some words that can be recited in one way and that can be recited another way. Is that something which the traditionalists, the Muslims, the scholars had to invent in order to try and explain the variants, the readings of the variants? No. This is something which has textual evidence from the time of the Prophet himself. He said it. And this is probably one of the most explicit ahadith that show us that the Quran, and put this in right, this one I'm about to say now, in your own words, that the Quran is not a fixed text. Full stop. Point 1. Quran is not a fixed text. It is a multiformal text. Meaning, we don't claim that the Quran should not have variants. Listen carefully, please. Some people, they're still making videos for 5 years, 10 years. Are they foolish? Are they foolish? We are saying we don't claim that the Quran should not have variants. We are claiming that they should have variants. In fact, if the Quran was only one way, this would disprove this hadith. Subhanallah. Say that one more time, please. Yes. If the Quran is only one reading and there's no malik and tathabbatu and tabayyanu and this and that, this would disprove this hadith. Say, what is this hadith? What is it talking about? What on earth is it talking about? So there has to be variance. And this is a Sahih hadith. There has to be variance. And the variance, look at this, was lit taysiri, was to facilitate ease. Was to facilitate what? Ease. Because there's some people, they find it easy to use one word, and other people, they find it easy to use another. So, and if you look at all of the ahadith, and I haven't got time to do this in this webinar, that deal with where the Prophet is literally making dua to Jibreel, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Jibreel, asking for Jibreel to send it, yes, the Quran, to reveal it in a way that can help the old people and the one who does not know kitaba, not know how to read or write, and he's trying to make it accessible. He wants it to be accessible for everybody. This is the reason why there's some words like this and this word like that. That's why. Lit-taysir. Now, that's the textual basis for it. So let's move on to the next one. So the question is, what are they? Okay, what are the ahruf? The ahruf, you see, there's 2 major opinions. Some say, oh, there's 40 opinions actually. These 40 opinions, they're not really opinions. You know, as Suyuti mentions in Al-Itqan, that there's 40 opinions. People don't take that seriously. And with all due respect, the mutakhasisin, the specialists of the area, they don't take that seriously. Yes, there's not 40 opinions. There's 40. Some of the things that people say are from Sufi orders or something like that, and they say this al-amr wal-nahy wal-nasikh wal-mansukh yani kada kada. This is not. These are not part of the 40. No. They don't have backing, and this is why I'm saying this. I'm not saying this Muhammad Hijab is saying. No, I'm saying that these 40 opinions, they don't have that much backing. The two opinions which have the most backing are the opinions of the Qurra and the Mutakallimin. Opinion 1, and the opinion of At-Tabari, who is the opinion of the Fuqaha and al-Hadith, which is opinion 2. Okay, so you have two different kinds of opinion. So let's go through each one. The Qurra, people like Ibn Jazari, and Mutakallimun, people like Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, Razi and others, they are just saying that the ahruf are 7 categories of difference. For example, word order, words having more ziyadatu wa nuqsan, more or less letters, etc. So what they're looking at is they've got the 10 qira'at in front of them, and they're saying what are the categories of difference and variation that we find, and they categorize 7 such categories. And it must be said that someone like Ibn Jazari, for example, has a different categorization. So Al-Baqillani, who has a different, they all believe it's awjuhul khilaf. There are 7 compartments, if you like, categories, if you like, of difference. Let me give you an example. Say you go to a car showroom and you see cars in front of you. Yes, you see different cars. Yeah. And you see there's, big car, a Jeep looking car, like a coupe. I don't know, I'm not into cars that much, I have to be honest. I don't know about the different kind of cars, yeah? And maybe you see a motorcycle as well, yeah? Maybe a skateboard there as well, yeah? You see maybe a scooter, maybe. So you see different vehicles, a lorry, and they're different colors. Different one, black one, white one, red one, yellow one, green one, blue one. Now, I'm within my right to say, look, I'm going to put all the vehicles together which are blue. I'm going to put all the vehicles together which are blue. And I'm going to put all the vehicles together which are red. And I'm going to put all the vehicles together which are green. And I'm going to put all the, and so on and so forth. That's one category of difference. What? Color. Color. And then I might say, look, I'm going to try and compartmentalize in a different way now. I'm going to put all the scooters together. I'm going to put all the cars together. I'm going to put all the lorries together, and so on and so forth. So what? I have a different category of difference. And then I say, look, I'm going to put, I'm going to put all the diesel cars together, and I'm going to put all the unleaded petrol cars together, and I'm going to put all the vehicles with no electric cars, and so on and so forth. It's another category of change. So what these people are saying is that we're looking at different categories of change within the 7 qira'at, or the 10 mutawatir, the most, they call them the mutawatir, the most authoritative from mass transmissional perspective, from the angle. And we're going to look at different categories of change. And these are, they would argue, yes, these are the 7 ahruf, the different categories. So just would say it's like, for example, I'll give you just 1 or 2, the top of my head, taqdeem wa ta'khir. And there's only one example of that by Surah Al-Tawbah, by the way. But so where you have one word, qatalu qutlu, I can't remember exactly the evidence for that, but that's one category. And then you have another ziyadatu wa nuqsan. Then you have a third category, which is, for example, you have tajmi'a and tafreed. For example, having pluralizing and singularizing the same word, and so on and so. These are 7 categories, you see. So they say these are the 7 ahruf that the Prophet ﷺ is talking about. These are the 7 ahruf but there's a problem with this view. It doesn't explain the hadith mentioned previously. That, how will this facilitate? And it's very difficult to imagine. Yes, you can argue. It can facilitate, possibly making it easier for the people, but making something a plural or a singular is not really going to make it easier for the tribes. You could argue this, and I would agree with that. Is that a hole in the narrative? Yeah, maybe it is, actually. Maybe it is a hole in the narrative. But if you say, wait a minute, some disbeliever are going to take your words out of context. No, it's the hole in what narrative? In the Quran narrative. Though that opinion. Not in the whole of Islam narrative. Come on, please. Don't be ridiculous. Yeah, don't be embarrassing. So it doesn't explain, moreover, it doesn't explain the shad narrations or narrations which are outside of the scope of the Uthmani Rasm. Because the question is, now you've got these 7, but are these 7 are not enough to tell us the differences manuscript differences? Listen, manuscript differences outside of the Uthmanic Rasm, in addition to narrational differences as well outside of the Rasm. Really, this is not, it doesn't have the scope to deal with that. Let's be honest. It can deal with the variations within, but outside, it doesn't deal with it as good. We have to be honest. Because how could it explain وَالذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنْثَى وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى? It's not really, where does it fit into Ibn Jazari's 7 categories? It doesn't really fit in neatly into his categories, to be honest. Neither does it fit into Al-Baqillani's 7 categories or Al-Razi's 7 categories, which are all different. By the way, they have different categories, even though they all say they're different categories. So, for example, going back to our analogy of the showroom with all the different vehicles. So I can choose color, I can choose, petrol or diesel, I can choose this, that. But all these people who say this category difference, they choose different categories, you see. So if the categories were so clear, someone would argue, right, and rightfully so, why don't you all agree upon the same categories? Do you see the point here? So there are some issues. It's not perfectly explaining of all of the variables. So that is an issue. But it does have the advantage of explaining at least, okay, these are the categories of difference, and it doesn't go completely out of line with making it easier for people. I can imagine that how could that make it easier, but not in a full way, to be honest, because the word is before or after. I'm not really seeing how that will help a person who's an ummi, like you've got to think about that. Now, Tabari's view, which is the view of the majority and of the fuqaha and of al-hadith, and Ibn Abd al-Barr, not Muhammad Hijab, Ibn Abd al-Barr says it's the view of the majority of people. They say, Tabari says, and he expands upon this in his work, Muqaddimat Tafsir al-Tabari, because he had a work that was written which was bigger, which is now it's not extant. It's been miscatalogued or something, it's not with us today. But in his Muqaddimat Tafsir al-Tabari, he says basically this. He says that in one word, you can have up to 7 differences. You can have up to 7 differences. For example, the word aqbil means come here in Arabic. Aqbil, you put this down. Before we put this down, you're going to write down what are the ahruf. 2 major opinions. The opinion of the Qurra and the Mutakallimun. And we said, what is that opinion? 7 categories of difference. And each of those individuals, like Ibn Jazari, Al-Razi, and Baqillani, they have different category descriptions. So that's opinion 1, major opinion. Opinion 2 now is the opinion of the Tabari and the majority of the Fuqaha and Al-Hadith. They say that in one single word, you can have up to 7 variations. So they say, for example, the word aqbil, you can have aqbil wa halumma wa ta'ala. And in the word idhab, you can asra' wa adhib wa idhab wa kada wa kada wa kada. So you can have different words up to 7, which these words which are up to 7 facilitate ease. And by the way, this makes more sense in terms of facilitation of ease. You have to say. And I'm not doing tarjih here, I'm leaving this out there. They both have their. But if you think about facilitation of ease, I mean, the fact that you can say aqbil or halumma or ta'ala, clearly that will make sense that, okay, this makes it easier for like one Arab saying aqbil, ta'ala. We even say ta'ala now in the Arab world, ta'ala. Most Arabs say ta'ala. Aqbil. I mean, if I say to my mom, or my son or whatever, aqbil, he's going to say, what do you mean by aqbil? If I say ta'ala, he don't understand what I'm trying to say. So I can see how using different words which are synonymous, yes, using different words which are synonymous but which mean the same thing, but for a different Arab tribe, would facilitate ease for different people and would make the Quran accessible to such people. I can see that. But now there's a question. Let me see if it's in the next slide. 1 second. The question is, how can we explain the fact that at-Tabari, like you do have these other categories of difference? I mean, we said before that at-Taqdeem wa-Ta'khir of the 10 qira'at only comes one time. There's only one example of it. But you do have some other category of difference. For example, you can have the same word with the same, what you call in Arabic, haykel, jism. Has the same haykel, the same jism, but it's not a synonym, but it has an i'rabi difference. Now, this is all, if you don't understand what I'm going to say, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break it down, don't worry. Don't worry. For example, you have a verse in the Quran where it says, بَلْ عَجِبَتَ وَيَسْخَرُونَ. بَلْ عَجِبَتَ وَيَسْخَرُونَ. You have become estranged, or you found this thing weird, and they make fun of it. That's what the ayah means. And then you have another qira'ah which says, بَلْ عَجِبْتُ وَيَسْخَرُونَ. If Allah is saying بَلْ عَجِبْتُ with a dhamma on the ta, that means He is finding it weird. Allah Himself is finding it weird, which is why we said this is a different thing now. This is a creedal thing. Does Allah find things weird? Does Allah find things weird? How can you say? Now, obviously, these two qira'ahs, it's the same words, but the i'rab, because in Arabic you have something called i'rab, which is not in English. You don't have i'rab in English. And the i'rab is تغيير أواخر الكلم, basically the end of each word, dhamma, fatha, kasra, and so on and so forth. And that changes the meaning. Whether you're talking mukhatab, and mutakallim. Is it first person, second person, or third person? The word is the same. Listen, the word is the same, but now, because the Arabi difference, you have dhamma in one qira'ah and fatha in one qira'ah, has changed the tense. Yes, the Qur'an opinion, they do have that as well. They have a category of difference where it's either first, second, or third person. They do have that. However, at-Tabari's opinion here, the problem with it is, does it account for such words which have Arabi differences which are not synonymous for the tribes? Now, this is a very complex question. The answer is yes. And how do we know this? We know this because if you look at his tafsir of that particular ayah, he says that both, and this is something Farid from Farid Response, mashallah, he's the one who, he sent me a maqta of that. Wallahi, he is to be credited for this example. And if you don't know Farid Response channel, you should know by now. You should be subscribed to his channel, actually. Yeah, how dare you not be subscribed to his channel? Anyway, so it's a very good point that at-Tabari, he accepts the differences which are not just synonyms. Meaning what? Meaning that any category of difference which is less severe than the category of synonymous change can be explained to at-Tabari through the ahruf. Whether it's within one harf or within the seven. Either way, at-Tabari explains it that Jibreel sent it to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in this way and in that way, and that's exactly what he said in the tafsir of that particular verse. Now, so here what we have with at-Tabari's opinion is a little bit more facilitation, and it explains more within the tradition. It explains more within the tradition. In the sense that now we know, okay, it facilitates ease. Yeah, it facilitates ease because you're using a different word, synonymous word. Another thing with at-Tabari's opinion, which is very, very important, and now you should be putting it down. At-Tabari's opinion. Number one, different synonyms of the same word that facilitates for the tribes. It's not limited to these differences. Yes, so other differences are also could be explained, but because we don't have the full extent work of the Tabari, we can't explain to you exactly. He believes harf 1 is this, harf 2 is this, harf 3 is this, harf 4 is that, and so on. It doesn't go like that with him. He doesn't do this. He doesn't go like that. The Qur'an do that, yeah, and the Mutakallimun do that. At-Tabari doesn't go into such depth because really and truly he's kind of, it's almost as if, I'm not saying he's saying this, but it's almost as if he's saying, I can't go into this sequence because I don't know exactly which is the harf. But all of the, basically this is what he's saying. And this is what we need to know. One liner, all of the variational difference within the 10 qira'at are explained through the ahruf. Whether you believe that the ahruf are exactly 7, because 7 could mean, according to many of the scholars, just many in the Arabic language, or you believe it's actually 7. That the ahruf are the explanatory mechanism that we use to assess the different variations of Quran. And what's interesting about At-Tabari is that he says in his Muqaddimah, he says that, question, هل قراءات العشر, or he doesn't believe, by the way, his opinion in terms of قراءات العشر is different to the opinion of the Quran. But or is the Uthmani رسم? هل المصحف العثماني is the Uthmanic رسم, yes, محتوي على جميع الأحرف? Is it encompassing of all of the ahruf? He says no. Wait a minute. Why is that important? I'll tell you why. Because the 10 qira'at that we have in front of us, the Qur'an believe that all of the 7 ahruf are in them. At-Tabari does not believe that. One more time. The Qur'an, Ibn Jazari and so on, the first opinion, as you can see up in the slide, Ibn Jazari, Mutakallimun, etc. Those guys believe that all of the 7 ahruf are in the qira'at that we have. Whereas the Tabari does not believe in that. He says you can have a harf, listen carefully. You can have a harf outside of the Uthmani Mus'haf. What does this mean? It means that if we find the manuscript, or if we find the narration, or if we find something which has a different lexical formulation than the one we have in Uthmani Mus'haf, one conceivable understanding, according to Tabari and the Fuqaha, many of them, is that it's a harf. But it's a harf that has not met the conditions, and we're going to go through the conditions that are required in order to make it Quran. But it could be a harf. So the question is, if someone says, well, there's narration of Ibn Mas'ud saying yatim and fajr, how comes he was telling this man to say yatim, yatim? Then he says at the end, fajr. Or the one we talked about was Abu Darda, or this narration or that narration. We say, khas, it could be harf. What's the problem? On Tabari's view is that you can have a harf outside of the Uthmanic Mus'haf. Now, why is this significant? Question, why is this significant? Because, pay attention, if you believe that there can be a harf outside of the Uthmanic Mus'haf, every single manuscript evidence which contradicts the Uthmani Mus'haf is irrelevant and is explained through the ahruf, according to not me, according to At-Tabari and the Fuqaha. Listen carefully. If you find any manuscript in the world that goes against the Uthmani Mus'haf, or if you find the narration within the hadith tradition which does mukhalafat, which goes against the Uthmani Mus'haf, according to At-Tabari, he says that's fine, because you can have a harf outside of the Uthmani Mus'haf. You can. How does he come to this conclusion? He says the reason why this is the case is because actually is the ummah, is the preservation of Quran. When you're preserving the Quran, do you need to preserve all 7 ahruf, or do you need to preserve 1? Very important question. Because this question is about burden of proof. The ahruf, do all 7 need to be preserved, or does only 1 need to be preserved? And by the way, this is a very important question, because when we say as Muslims, especially defending Islam, that the Quran needs to be preserved, or the Quran is preserved, someone could argue, is the Quran, or question, is the Quran preserved with all 7 ahruf, or is it preserved with less than 7? Now, pay attention, because the Mutakallimun and the Qurra, they have different answers to this question. And so what we do is we go with the adna, we go with the less, and I'll tell you why. The Qurra will say, no, actually, in order for the Quran to be preserved, then all 7 have to be preserved. All the 7 ahruf have to be preserved. And the At-Tabari says, no, actually, only 1 needs to be preserved. Why? Why? He says, because look, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was telling us to read with the ahruf, did he tell us to read with the ahruf as an obligation, or did he tell us to read with the ahruf as a facilitation? And he says, actually, he does so as a facilitation, meaning what? You can choose to read, yes, with this harf or that harf or that harf. So in order for the Quran to be preserved according to At-Tabari, only one harf needs to be preserved. Meaning what? Meaning the burden of proof is lowered already, according to At-Tabari and the Fuqaha. The burden of proof in terms of what is preservation is lowered. So that's why I say, in order for the defense, the intellectual defense of Islam to be defeated, we shouldn't go with the a'la, we should go with the adna, we should go with the lower. Meaning what? That only one harf needs to be preserved. But we know that more than one harf is preserved because we know the variants exist. But according to At-Tabari, even if the variants did not exist, yes, even if the variants did not exist, then it would be immaterial because we only need one. He gives the example: if I have an oath in the Quran, it says if I have an oath, and in this oath I go against the oath, like I swear incorrectly that something is going to happen, I have a choice of kiswa, or of clothing the poor, or of fasting, or of it'am al-masakin. So he says, هذا على وجه التخيير والترخيص. This is it's a license. You have a choice. If I do one of those things, then that's it. Yani if I do kiswa, then خلاص. Abu Amr al-Dani says the same thing, by the way, one of the major scholars. If I just do one of those things, then it's enough. Meaning, it's على وجه الترخيص والتخيير لا على وجه الوجوب. Yeah, so it's not. I'm not obliged to do all three of those things. He says, likewise, the ummah is not obliged to preserve all 7 ahruf. It's only obliged to preserve one. And anything additional to that, it's good, but it's not required. So that's an important point. To summarize this important topic, there are 2 major opinions as to what the ahruf is. The opinion of the Qurra and the Mutakallimun is that there are 7 categories of difference. We gave the example of the cars and so on. The opinion of Tabari and the Fuqaha and al-Hadith is actually that it's one word up to 7 differences, synonymous differences with different skeletals. يعني تعالى هلما is completely different. It's different skeleton. And it could also include things which are smaller than that, adna min dhalik, which we talked about. Bal ajibata wa ajibatu. Does he think that's all within one harf or within the 7? He hasn't spelled that out because we haven't got all his works. However, we do know that he does believe it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, and that it's all talaqqi. وَإِنَّكَ لَتُلَقَّى الْقُرْآنَ مِنْ لَدُنْ حَكِيمٍ عَلِيمٍ. As the Quran says, that Allah, He sent down this Quran to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam بِالتَّلَقِّي, like word for word. That's what it means, word for word. So that's what the 2 opinions are. So what are the qira'at? Now, if you heard some of the apologetics and some of the weird sayings of the anti-Muslims, they'll say, look, there's 1,000 differences, 10,000 differences, 40,000 differences in meanings between the qira'at al-ashr, the 10 qira'ats. I've even actually seen some Orientalists use this kind of argumentation in lectures. Like Shadi Hikmat and others, he's like, these are 10 masters, and look at this, he's trying to make a monster out of it. My friend, there are 700 words, let's say 1,400. Let's say 1,000 words, differences. Those 7,000 words can take different formulations. So different arrangements of 700 words can be in the millions. Think about this. Say, for example, if I have 10 words, and of the 10, yes, you can, what I'm trying to say to you is this: of the 700 words, the Qurra, the 700 words differences, they chose different formulations of them. So clearly the different formulations, if you multiply them, it has a multiplier effect, but it's only 700 word difference. And as I said before, it has no narrative altering implication. So we're talking about 700 words arranged in different ways. So what the Qari does, the Qurra, yes, are 10 individuals. They're 10 individuals who choose. They choose. Is it going to be Malik Yawm al-Din, or is it going to be Malik Yawm al-Din? Is it going to be the owner of the Day of Judgment, or is it going to be the king of the Day of Judgment? So when they come to that choice, is it going to be king or owner? That's what's called takhir or khiyar. This ikhtiyar of the Qari, ikhtiyar al-Qari it's called. That's what they call it. Ikhtiyar al-Qari. They choose either Malik or Malik. And if they choose with 700 different instances, then if this choice is what creates a qira'ah. So for example, in Hafs and Asim, when we say Malik Yawm al-Din, the owner of the day of judgment, that's because Hafs and Asim, by the way, because Shu'bah has the same qira'ah, they decide that it's going to be Malik or Yawm al-Din. So Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, who is the teacher of Asim, when he taught Asim, he taught him Malik Yawm al-Din. Ibn Mas'ud, when he taught Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, he might have taught him both. But Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, who's a tabi'i, he said, you know what, I'm going to choose Malik Yawm al-Din. Now the Qari chooses. Is it going to be Malik Yawm al-Din or Malik Yawm al-Din? Yes, it's going to be Malik Yawm al-Din. It doesn't mean that because there's a choice that there's ijtihad wa idkhal al-ra'i. That now the Qari is putting his own words in. This is nonsense. There's a pool of pre-existing words that are available, and then the Qari chooses which one of those. And all of them have the backing, the angelic backing of Jibreel. And they all have the sanad to the Prophet Muhammad. So a qira'ah, in order to be authentic, it has to be 3 criteria. Please put this down. In order for a qira'ah to be authentic, let's see if it's in the next, sorry, let me see. Yeah. In order for the qira'ah to be authentic, it has to be in line with the triangulated method. Number 1, it has to be with a sanad sahih. It has to have an authentic narration. Number 2, it has to be what? And by the way, Ibn Jazari says, shuhra has to be popular as well. So number 1, it has to be authentic narration. Number 2, it has to be in line with the Rasm Uthmani. Why? Because the Rasm Uthmani, the Uthmanic script, is that which has the most backing of the Sahaba. So we know now the script itself is not going to facilitate all of the ahruf, according to At-Tabari's view. Yet, in order for it to be a sahih qira'ah, it has to be in line with the Rasm Uthmani. Number 3, it has to be in line with the Arabic language. This is what we call the harmonizing method. The Qari now chooses what word he's going to put. Is it going to be Malik or Malik? But the choice is limited to that which the Prophet said. Listen carefully. 700 words that the Prophet said in different ways. He chooses Malik or Malik. Tasabbatu tabayyan. He chooses those. There is a choice that is made by the Qari. Asim chose Malik, not Malik. Nafi' chose Malik, not Malik. So those choices are limited, and they are backed by the Prophet. They are not, but arrangements of those, if you multiply them, obviously they're going to be in the thousands. If you multiply them, it's going to be in the thousands. But we're not talking. The original is 700 words, and if you multiply 700 by 2, 3, 4, it's going to be in the thousands. But we're not talking about thousands of differences. We're talking about 700 words that have different awjuh, different ways of being recited. That's it. So the Qari gets to choose. Is it going to be Malik or is it going to be Malik? The Qari gets to choose. Tathabbatu tabayyan is going to choose. Nunshiduha nunshiruha is going to choose. You know, and so on and so forth. Surujun Siraj, which is very interesting, you know, this verse in Surah Al-Furqan. You know, Suruj means stars, more than one star. Siraj and Munira means one star. So in one qira'ah, we have many stars, and that's what we know in the cosmos. Interesting, actually. But yeah, so they get to choose which is it going to be. Is it going to be one word or another word? But that choice is limited by the ahruf and by the sanad. It's important. It's important. Yes, it's important. That textual criticism from the Islamic perspective is called naqd al-qira'ah. Any qira'ah, which, because there's some fools say there's no such thing as textual criticism in Islam. There is. And by the way, there's a harmonizing method. The harmonizing method is what? The triangulated method of the sanad. Number 1, the narration, the chain of narration. Number 2, the rasm, the consonantal skeleton. And number 3, what? Number 3, what? You should be paying attention now. Number 3, what? We said the rasm. And we said the consonantal skeleton, the sanad. And we said Lugha Arabiya, it's got to be Arabic language. It has to be in line with the Arabic of that day, not the Egyptian one or the Iraqi one or this or that. No. It's got to be that of the day, the classical Arabic of that time, the 7th century, which we have preserved through dictionaries and through poetries and so on and so forth. So you see, everything has a chain. And the reason why these became the most famous is because they had the most students and because their qira'ah has the most robust and authentic chain of narration back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the reason why they became the most famous. That's the reason why they became the most famous. You see, but you might be a bit confused, thinking, "Oh, I'm not getting the difference between the ahruf and the qira'ah." The difference between the ahruf and the qira'ah is the following. The ahruf, listen carefully. So put this as a question: what's the difference, therefore, between the ahruf and the qira'ah? The ahruf are the differences, or the types of differences. Yeah, the differences in the variation. The qira'ah is a choice. Listen, all the choices. Listen carefully. اختيار القارئ, the choices of said master of recitation to incorporate one difference from another. You see, so that's what اختيار القارئ is. So that's the difference between the ahruf and the qira'ah. Now you might not get this, but it's heavy material. I told you already. And that's why you have to keep referring to your notes and go back to this recording that you're listening to now. You'll get it eventually. It's not something you're meant to get. Or don't think, oh, I don't understand this and this is confusing. If it's confusing, you shouldn't have. But this is what it's all about. You have to go back and listen again, I'm afraid. And a lot of non-Muslims are listening, so I've never heard this before. I know they are listening. I know David Wood's saying, oh, bloody hell. What the hell, man? What did I get myself into? Why am I even talking about this matter? Why am I talking about this, man? I've not read these books. I have no access to them. What's his name? Davis, whatever his name is. J. Smith or whatever his name is. So, you know, he's thinking, what the hell is this? All these words and all these terms. And all. Well, brother, you shouldn't get yourself involved in that, with all due respect. You know, these enemies of Islam, you know, and this and that. Listening to this, thinking it's too much more than I thought. They have answers, actually. Oh, damn. I know they're thinking that. I know they're eating their hand. I know that. Now, the opinion of the Tabari and the Fuqaha has the following effect. We can explain with the opinion of Tabari and the Fuqaha, number one, that manuscript differences may be because of the ahruf. Possibly. Any difference to the Uthmanic, any manuscript you give me in the world that's different from what I'm reading in my salah and what I believe is Quran, I will tell you it's conceivable that that could be a harf. Khalas, end of discussion. Don't waste my time. It's it. That's it. Hold on. What? What? Anything you give me, I'm going to say it's possible it's harf. It's possible that it was abrogated. You get me a narration, it's possible it was a harf. It was possible it was abrogated. Khalas, these two things. It's possible that it was a harf. It's possible that it was abrogated. How can you have a harf outside the Uthmanic text? Well, because according to Tabari, we don't need to preserve all 7 of the ahruf, we only need to preserve 1. It's not just the Tabari. Dani says the same thing. Many of the fuqaha say the same thing. Many of Ahl Hadith say the same thing. It's the majority, according to Ibn Abdul Bar, that's the majority opinion of Islam. Majority opinion. So get me any manuscript difference, any in the whole wide world, Sharqan wa Gharban. Get me any one of them, please. And tell me here's something that's different. Make 1,000 videos, a billion videos. Write 1,000 books and articles, peer-reviewed ones. I'll read them and laugh because you know why? I'll tell you, because it could be a harf. And this is what I told Van Putten, and he agreed with me on Twitter. He said, you know, you're right. It could be explained to the harf. He's a non-Muslim. He's a non-Muslim. I don't understand how non-Muslims can agree with this, and some Muslims can have doubts about it. I don't get it. I don't get how the fact that some non-Muslims, you're not even a Muslim, you don't believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And I'm telling you that, okay, there's some manuscript here and manuscript there. Yeah, it could be a harf, according to Tabari. And then, yeah, it makes sense. That's an inroad. It's true. It's intellectually satisfying. But then you have Muslims say, I have got doubts, I don't know, and this can't. Be quiet. Have some guts. Be a man. Stop being the slave of the Orientalists. Come on. It's an inferiority complex. Why, man? This is embarrassment. Wallahi, some people have been calling me and giving me some emails. Brother, I have doubts. What doubts, man? What embarrassment is that? Why you have doubts? Why? The Orientalists, if you read their works, you'd be surprised. They're more on our side than they're against us. You'd be surprised, wallah, you'd be surprised. And some Tullab al-Ilm that come out and say these Orientalists this and that. They don't know what the Orientalists say. Some of them are actually with us, not against us. So tell me now, you find any manuscript in the whole wide world, or you find me a singular narration which goes against the Quran, Uthmanic Rasul. What does it do for me? Nothing. If the harf possibly was abrogated, possibly, khalas. What's the problem? I don't understand. Why you have doubts? What kind of man are you anyway? Huh? What kind of woman are you? What kind of Muslim are you? What kind of Muslim are you? Let's be honest about the situation. Putting doubts in that one's heart and that one's mind and this one's soul. Be quiet, man. This is all in our tradition. We have a chain of narration. Yes, we have a chain of narration that goes back to the prophets. And yes, we believe the Quran is a multiformal text, not a fixed text. So yes, we believe in the variants. We believe in the variants. And we believe that they're all from Allah. And we have the textual evidence for that. And we believe in the ahruf. And we believe in the qira'at. And we have a textual criticism. And that's that. And that's that. So this has a great explanatory, this opinion of At-Tabari, I would agree, has a great explanatory scope. And it allows us to explain all of the differences within the qira'at that we have and we read the Quran with. And all of the differences that may emerge outside from a manuscript perspective or from a narrational perspective. Tell me now how an Orientalist has any argument against the Quran, the preservation of Quran. Tell me how. Sorry, I just got a bit passionate there. Well, make sure you're taking your notes. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you got from that. So, why do you assume the manuscripts and narrations that lie outside of the Quran, why don't you assume that they're ahruf? They may be ahruf. They may not be. But they don't have an authentic narration. And if they do, they don't fulfill the condition, the triangulated Ibn Jazari condition. It's not just Ibn Jazari, by the way. At-Tabari also has these conditions. They have to have a sanad that's correct. And other like him, Ad-Dani has that condition. Ibn Qutaybah has that condition. Ibn Mujahid has that condition. Yes. We know, we've read the books. Sorry, Yani. Orientalists, you have not read anything. David Wood, you've not read a damn thing. All you're reading is all you get your information from is me. I'm your teacher, boy. And all of you people, I'm your teachers, you're Orientalists. Wallahi, we are your teachers. And you know it. Don't pretend to be our teacher. You have nothing on us. You know nothing. Don't ever come and step up to us, wallahi. All of you. And I know you're listening to me and shaking. You need to use the toilet now. I know you do. Anyway, all of the major opinions need to show that one harf is preserved. Only one. Yani the fact that we have, and this is a very good yaqeen. Wallah, it's a very good. I like this thing. Yes, sometimes they have some weird statements in some of this. Oh, yeah, it's true. But this one is a good, very good paper written by Nazir Khan. Excellent one. Read it. It's a fantastic paper. We'll go to the next one. So we don't need a manuscript. This is the beauty of it all. The Quran is from qira'ah. The word Quran itself means transmission orally. So we don't need a single manuscript. We don't need a single manuscript to preserve the preservation of Quran. We don't need a single one, not even one. All we need is a chain of narration. Now listen carefully. Listen carefully, and I want you to all listen. I know the enemies of Islam are listening to me. Let me take my glasses off. Let me tell you, if you saw what I look like now, believe me, a lot of the enemies of Islam would be very scared. Just like Apus was very scared. Many of them would be very scared because, when we come with the truth and the haqq, when we come with the truth and the haqq and all of the details like this, khalas, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Question the preservation after this. Go on. Because you know what? I went to uni on a postgraduate level and I sat and, you know, wallahi, I'll tell you something, yeah? I sat on a textual criticism class for the Bible. And I'll be honest with you, yeah? Old Testament. It's called text criticism. That was the name of the module. And I was sitting down and listen to me. They were talking about the Old Testament. This was Old Testament text criticism. And the guy, obviously, they all knew the languages. Like most of them, they were kind of weak on them. They're nothing like how the Muslim community is with the Arabic. They're kind of weak, like any, barely can read the Greek and barely can read the Hebrew. And I asked the professor in the class, I'm not an expert in biblical textual criticism. I have to ask, what is the harmonizing method? Listen carefully what I asked him. I asked him, what's the harmonizing method with the Bible? How do you know what goes in the Bible and what comes out of the Bible? Listen carefully. And write this down. Comparative religion. Write it down, underline it. Harmonizing method. Underline it. Now the question is, what is the harmonizing method for the Quran? Me and you know now. It's the triangulated method. You have to have an authentic narration. You have to have Rasm Uthmani. And you have to have what? The Arabic language, yes. All three of these things. If it fits those criteria, or if it's mutawatir, according to Ibn Jazari, it's Quran. Now, as for the Bible, question. What is the, I have a question. What is the harmonizing method for the Bible? Do they have a chain of narration? I asked the guy, professor, big time, big shot. No, it's no joke, this guy. I said to him, do they have a harmonizing method? Huh? Do they have a chain of narration? Do they have to go in line with the language? Does it this or does it that? Do you know what he said to me? And Uqsimu billah al-azim, I will never forget what he said to me. He said, the Bible, the Old Testament, listen carefully to all those people out there, the Christians, how dare you talk about preservation? It actually makes me angry. Listen to what he said, not a stupid running around the street, speaker's corner and talking nonsense. This is a professor at the high levels, and this is all over your books. He said the following. He said there is no harmonizing method. Wait a minute, what did he say? He said there is no harmonizing method. So how do you know what goes in the Bible and what comes out of the Bible? How do you know what goes in the Bible and what goes out of the Bible? That's really it. And it goes to the judgment, really. You might as well flip a coin. I think Bruce Mesker mentioned this in his book somewhere. You might as well flip a coin. Flip a coin to know what goes in and what goes and doesn't go in. Sorry. You have no narration, zero narration, no chain back to Jesus or Moses. No chain. Don't speak to me. Don't speak about Islam. Don't ever open your mouth about Islam again. Wallahi, don't open your mouth. Don't ever open your mouth. You have no chain. Going back to either Moses or Jesus, you have no chain of narration and you know it. And a lot of you are losing faith and you should. Uqsimu billah al-azim. I know the Christians are on this chat. Lose faith. I tell you, lose faith. It's better for you. Because this is a nonsense. You have no chain of narration. No chain. And in fact, the Old Testament, he told me in front of me, he said, look, we have the Masoretic text, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have the Masoretic text, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you have the Septuagint. And the Septuagint is not even in Hebrew, my friend. And they say we translate it from the Greek into the Hebrew and then put it into the text. It's like, it's not even the same language. It's not even the same language as that which Moses spoke. It's a translation. And you're making that one of the primary sources in your text criticism. And you're comparing with all audacity because of the ignorance of the Muslim community and the weakness of the leaders. You are comparing your method of preservation with us. Uqsum billah, you have deceived and self-deluded. Dunning-Kruger effect, you jokers, you imbeciles. How dare you talk about the Quran, you imbecilic individuals. It's not even in the same language. And they put it in there. Let alone sanad and this and that, and the Sahaba were going to beat each other up because they didn't know. Is this one saying it? Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. And these weak Muslims in the West sending me emails, and this I'm losing my faith, and I'm a hafiz, I'm losing. Get the hell out! You are never a strong believer in the first place, you weakling. You're a weakling because you don't know your tradition. You're sitting there watching Netflix and you don't read the books of Islam. That's why you are where you are. That's why you are where you are, you imbecile. It's our fault. There's no harmonizing method. And so today, inshallah, we should have covered. We should have covered the chronology, the history. We should have covered what is the ahruf, what is the qira'ah, and of course the primacy of the oral tradition. And with that, I leave it for questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Actually, I shouldn't be saying assalamu alaikum. I should be saying, yes, I'll be leaving it for questions now. So I'm going to be reading some of the questions right now. Okay. Someone's saying assalamu alaikum. Okay, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yep, another person. Why was the 99% of the Quran in the early manuscripts? It's obvious the 1% was added in. It wasn't added in. They have 99% folios and they don't have 1% of them. Why did Sheikh Yasir Qadi say that there were holes in the standard narrative? He made a mistake by saying that. He shouldn't have said this. He was talking to me as if he should, like we were in the classroom talking about the Qur'an's views. He told me that he believes in At-Tabari's view. He told me that he believes in At-Tabari's view. He doesn't believe in the Qur'an view. We said there's two major views. And he was talking about the holes in the Qur'an's view. And he was talking about the holes in Ibn Jazari's views and so on, which I agree there are holes in that view. So clearly, the disbelievers, they're looking for any words, a formulation of words to destroy Islam. Subhanallah, Ibn Mas'ud, he says, "Man kana al-muqtadiyan falyaqtadi biman qad mat fa inna al-hayya la yu'thar alayhi al-fitna." Whoever wants to follow someone, let him follow the people who died. Ibn Mas'ud, the same person we just mentioned, one of the masters of the Quran. For the one who's living, the fitna has not alleviated from him or from her. Meaning, why is everyone so hung up on what happens about Yasir Qadi? Sorry, if Yasir Qadi jumps off a cliff, we're going to jump off a cliff. If Yasir Qadi commits suicide, we're going to commit suicide. If Yasir Qadi, he did this, we're going to do that with him. And if Yasir Qadi become apostate, we're going to become apostates. And what's wrong with you, yani? For someone to really, wallahi, I find it bemusing and baffling how individuals in the West are so attached to person. Yani, what happens if I become disbeliever? Yani, what happens if I change my mind, become Shia? You're going to become Shia. If I become Shia, you're going to become Shia. If I become Ahmadi, you're going to become Ahmadi. If I go to that community, you're weak. Wallahi. Some of these individuals, they're really hung up. Yani. And it's not, yani, it's our fault. It's our fault that we become celebrity-obsessed individuals. I didn't get into dawah so that people can hang on to my every word and to this and that. And wallahi, it's embarrassing and it's humiliating. There's some Sahaba, there's some people. Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, he was a Sahabi and became a disbeliever. Sahabi. Did the disbelievers also become, the Sahaba also become disbelievers? Sahaba. There were big scholars that became disbelievers, ex-Muslims and apostates. Does that mean when those become ex-Muslims and apostates that we're going to, religious switching is a part of human life? I'm not saying Yasir Qadi is going to fit into that. But what I'm saying is, why are people so hung up, yani, with all due respect, about what people think? Yani, so what Yasir Qadi said, there's holes in the standard narrative. That's all I'm going to say. That's what he said. And what he said, he also said, I believe the Quran is 100% preserved. That's what he said. From what I remember, he said, I believe the Quran is 100% preserved. So, yani, why don't you just hang on to the muhkam and leave the mutashabih? If it comes out with anything other than that, then we'll deal with that. But that's all he said publicly. That's all he said publicly. If you bring something else, what he said in his emails and this is not my business, what he said in his emails, and what he meant is decontextualized. I'm sorry, I can't comment on that. But that's that, yani. Khalas. You stop being like obsessed celebrity, obsessive personalities, with all due respect. Who cares what Yasir Qadi said? Why he cares so much? Why? Doesn't matter what he said, to be honest, with all due respect. Does this work? We'll be given notes. I don't know. Can you tell Yasir Qadi your opinion? Yasir Qadi says he believes in the opinion of Tabari. That's what he says. What I just mentioned is what he believes in. He says he believes in that. Now, whether he's true to that or not is something that if he publishes anything in the future, we can look at academically. But that's what he says. He says there's holes in the narrative of the Quran, and it's my understanding. Of Ibn Jazari, of Ibn Qutayba, of يعني Al-Baqillani, of Al-Razi, and so on. So that's my understanding. Now, how many authentic narrations of the Quran are there, including 10 qira'at? Well, look, that's a very complicated question. I don't understand what it means, because you've got the 10 qira'at, then you have the riwayas. So at what level are we talking about? Are we talking about the level of Sahaba? Are we talking about the level of Tabi'in? Or talking about Atba Tabi'in? The question is, I don't know, and that's the question. That is the golden question, to be honest. How many are there? And that's why there's difference of opinion. And there were many books that were written at the time of the Tabi'in and Atba Tabi'in about this question, about how many qira'as are valid. At-Tabari himself had a qira'ah, which went because his whole book, his compendium, was lost. So the question is difficult to answer. With all due respect, it's difficult to answer. I can't give you an answer. Yeah. Did early Hanafis use Ibn Mas'ud's Mus'haf? I don't know. I don't know where you're getting that from. I have to ask someone from the madhab, because I don't know about that question, if they use his qira'ah. But the question is ashmal min dhalik. It's wider than that. Some people would read, like in Kufa and this and place, with qira'ahs of Sahaba and Tabi'in. It's true, like Al-A'mash and this, and they used to read with certain qira'ahs that were attributed to Sahaba. So they, at the level of Tabi'in, before the Qur'an came into play, they wouldn't obviously be saying I read with Qira'at Hafs and Asim, because these guys weren't around yet, so they weren't teachers yet. So they would be reading at the level of, or the names of this. They would say, for example, harf al-A'mash, or this is the harf of this person or that person. So what the early Hanafis use is baht. I have to go and do research for that. I don't know. Yeah, someone's mentioning the Birmingham manuscript. Oh, sorry. When were the Fathas, Kasras, Dhammas, and Sukuns added? So Ali ibn Abi Talib appointed Abu Aswad Du'ali to put them in. That's the standard opinion. That's what it is. But obviously there was other kinds of, when we talk about dots, we have to be careful, because there's all kinds of material now that's just on dots. Are we talking about the dots that yushakkil kalima? Are we talking about the dots that make the difference between ta and ya and tha and so on and so on? Yeah, these dots. Are we talking about the red dots that tell us that demarcate one ayah from the next ayah and so on and so forth? These are all different questions. But if we're talking about the ones that make the kalimat, and the fatha dhamma, Abu Aswad al-Du'ali. Yeah, so this was quite early on. But different dots have different times, and this is different. This is, if we're going into manuscript analysis, is different. But yeah, the reason why the dots were not there in the first place, what you call haykal al-kalima or jism al-kalima, is so that the kalima, or the consonantal skeleton of that word, the lexical phrase, would facilitate more than one reading. Because as we said, it's multiformal, so there's some words like malik and malik. Nowadays, if you look at the Mus'haf, you open up, it's something called the Alif al-Khanjariyya. So you got Malik, is spelled Mim Lam Kaf, but then you have an Alif Khanjariyya, which is like a dagger Alif in the middle, which is symbolic of that facilitation. So it's one lexical phrase which has the ability to indicate both reading, which is beautiful, amazing. Wallahi, it's so amazing how they made this, how the Sahaba were in. Wallahi, they're genius for doing it. They're geniuses. And Uthman al-Affan, when he put the Masahif together, he actually had this. By the way, it's not, when we say Mus'haf Uthman, it's not just one Mus'haf. It's more than one. Some say 7. One to Basra, one to Kufa, one to Medina, one to Mecca, and so on and so forth. One to Bahrain, one to this place. They sent it, and when he sent it with people to read it out, which is very, very important, because let me give you one example. When we say the word London, how do we read the word London? If you go to Cambridge Learner's Dictionary, it'll tell you there's it's called a schwa, these kind of learner symbols. It's completely different. But why do we not use the word or read the word London? It's London. The reason why we don't read it phonetically as it's spelled, like the grapheme doesn't associate particularly finely with the sound, is because, and the reason why that's the case is because someone's taught it to us like that. It's simply human people, individuals have taught London to us as that's how it sounds. which shows us it's not just as, oh, this is an ancient way of dealing with language. No, this is the contemporary way of dealing with language. And this is the only way of dealing with language. Why do you read it Polish and not Polish, and Polish and not Polish? Homographs and homonyms and all of these. Why do they operate in that manner? Because of context and human communication. So Uthman ibn Affan, to indicate his seriousness when it came to the preservation of the Quran, he sent the Mus'haf, but he also sent a person to read with the Mus'haf. It's like, and if you want to put it in modern parlance, taking someone, giving them a book, and then giving them like a, you know, a cassette or a video or a video to listen to how it sounds as well. This is the highest level of preservation. Tell me one other ancient document of that time that has that kind of level of it. Tell me one. I want to know. Give me a name. What, the Septuagint, the Masoretic text? Are you joking? The Septuagint, which is a translation, please, man. Please, wallahi, the Christians, it actually makes me physically angry that they're comparing their method of preservation with ours. Makes me physically angry. How dare you? How? And then when they're called, they say, you know, we're just being honest. Yeah, we have text criticism. You don't have text criticism. We do have text criticism. It's called naqd al-qira'at, and we have naqd al-riwayat, and we have a harmonizing method. The only difference between us and you is you don't have a harmonizing method. Anyway, sorry. Ubay ibn Ka'b believed that there were 116 in the Quran. Did he change his mind? Once again, all of those individuals, whoever said there was anything more or less than the canon, either they changed their mind, or they didn't believe in that in the first place. Or they didn't believe in that in the first place. And those two additional dua that were read, what Ubay ibn Ka'b was reading, he didn't believe was part of the Quran. That was the dua of qunut. You read it when you're doing qunut and stuff. Why would you think that he thinks that that's part of the Quran? And if he did, he had to have changed his mind. Because his asanid also have only 114 surahs. He had to have changed his mind. He can't be, all of his companions, all of his compatriots are reciting it one way, and he's going, no, sorry, this is not even about ahruf. This is about surah. So there's no majal there for change for that stuff. The Prophet ﷺ said that there are 7 qira'at. Now he said there are 7 ahruf. He didn't say that there were 7 qira'at. He said أنزل القرآن على 7 أحرف. He didn't say أنزل القرآن على 7 قراءات. He said أنزل القرآن على 7 أحرف. Don't confuse the qira'at and the ahruf. They are two different things. They are separate things. The qira'at are different from the ahruf. Yes? The qira'at incorporate the ahruf do not incorporate the qira'at. That's how it is. The qira'at are the difference in the qira'at are the ahruf. The differences in the qira'at, wherever they may be, are the ahruf. That's what it is. Even if we take a Tabari's view. The differences of the qira'at are the ahruf. Now, my question is, how can Umar both belong to the same tribe and have different dialects? Because both of these are high level. Listen, this is a very, I don't accept this interrogation. Some of this is mentioned in the classical books. And they say, well, Hisham al-Hakim is Qurashi and Umar al-Khattab is Qurashi. And how could they be reading in different ways? But there were not any Qurashis. I'm sorry, Umar al-Khattab was the top people in the whole community. Do you not think the Prophet Muhammad is going to teach Umar and Hisham al-Hakim a dialect which is outside of his tribe? Umar was not one of the ignorant ones. He can take learning, a qira'ah which is not from his dialect. What's the problem? He doesn't require taysir, is what I'm saying. There are some people that require taysir, and he didn't fit the category. If you look at the hadith that says that people that require taysir were the weak ones, the old ones, the little, sorry, not the little ones, the old ones, the weak ones, the shuyukh, the Sheikh al-Fani, the one who couldn't read. So taysir didn't feature for him. He didn't require taysir. So why would the Prophet make it easy for him? And he doesn't. It's like you're giving him. It's like asking this: go into a bodybuilder and saying, "How comes you gave him 80 kilograms to do bench press?" Because he can handle it. He can handle 80, 100, 120. No problem. So why does he require the facilitation? Just because they're from the same tribe doesn't mean this. So clearly that's not. I don't know. It's not the best term. What's the best book on Ahruf and Qira'at that you recommend in English? I don't know about books, to be honest, in English. I haven't read too many of them. But in Arabic, there's Tayyibus al-Nashr, the Muqaddimah of that, and the read Muqaddimah of al-Tabari. And these two will give you a good grounding because we've just covered that today. So if you read those two, then you'll be okay. In terms of the English language, go to that Wallahi, this is actually one of the best things I've read in Yaqeen, that thing by Nazir Khan. It's actually one of the best things in English I've read. I haven't read that much in English. It's 40 pages and it will give you an overview of some of the main opinions. 40 pages is very good. So go to that. Something that confuses me, if alternate qira'at follow the Uthmanic code, how comes there are added letters and words in the narration of Warsh such as تحت من تحتها الأنهار تحت الأنهار وسارعوا and so on. Yeah, I get you. Because when we say the Uthmanic text is that there's more than one mushaf. So Uthman al-Affan, he had one mushaf with سارعوا إلى مغفرة, and he had another mushaf with وسارعوا. You see. So when we say the Uthmanic text, we're talking about all of the masahif, which sometimes you can have ziyada or nuqsan even in the haykel of the kalima and even of the kalima itself. But usually it will be like min tahtiha in surah, Tawbah, and tahtiha in other surah. So min and without min, and wow and without wow, and so on, which, as I say, it doesn't really make a difference to the narrative. But yeah, because when we say Uthmanic masahif, we're talking about that which Uthman endorsed. And once again, we don't require it's because now it's preserved through the Qira'at. So the Uthmanic script is preserved through ulum. People would teach it to other people, and the Qira'ah was preserved through ulum as well, through the Qira'ah. So this is hopefully that you understand that. According to Timothy Keller, there is an academic research into the early compiling of the Quran. Is this true? I don't know. How can we be sure that manuscripts were not burned because they were verses bothered the companions? Well, there'd have to be in a massive tacit collusion for that to happen, to bother the companions. There'd be in a massive tacit collusion. And remember, at this time, there were companions that were actually in conflict of interest with one another. The companions were no monolith. And this shows you, ikhtilaf Sahaba has rahmah as well. And the rahmah it stops some of the people from saying these things because the Sahaba were not on one plane. Some Sahaba had different interests than other Sahaba. The Sahaba are a big group. So sometimes the ikhtilaf has a rahmah, which is it stops people from saying that they colluded on everything. Wallahu ta'ala. Nearly finished? Oh, it's a Maghrib time. Is it Maghrib? In 5 minutes? Oh, 20 minutes ago. Oh, subhanAllah. Okay, I'll answer 3 more questions. Assalamu alaikum. Regarding the different madhahibs, we are supposed to respect all madhabs and follow the Quran Sunnah. Yes. In line with Arabic language, yes. Where can we rewatch it? Sapiens Institute.org. J. Smith. Abdullah, Alhamdulillah for Tabari. And majority of Fuqaha. If one harf actually preserved, can it be that each of the Qira'at has chosen something else for one word, that there is a way it was forgotten? Is this true, or have all ways of reading certain always been preserved? Yeah, this is the debate. There's some words which were some shadh qira'at which are not preserved now and not being read, but the ones that we're reading are the ones which were preserved. So yeah, this is. But the idea that there was no textual criticism in the early, I mean, the Christians are only doing the textual criticism now, 2,000 years later. We've been doing textual criticism in the early days. That's the difference between us and them. They're so happy with their textual criticism. They did it in the wrong time. 2,000 years post-date. We did it 100 years after the Prophet died. One year they started doing textual criticism after he died. That's when you should do textual criticism. No, not 2,000 years after the date. How many manuscripts so far have been found that goes against Uthmanic Rasm? So according to Muhammad Tahsan, which I found this in Yaqeen's paper, and I chased it up, is 19 words or 19 mawatin, yeah, with a Sahih Hadith. Now, so that's hopefully this. Akhi, you should calm down. Subhanallah. Yes, I should calm down, but sometimes, get passionate. Those who doubt have never had a relationship with God. It was a bit scary though. Akhi, if people voice their doubts when being Muslim, you should react more calmly. Fair enough. Someone's getting excited. No, but to be honest with this whole people voicing their doubts. I'm sorry, but some of how it was dramatized, and I can tell you from experience, like when you see someone like that kind of whimpering and embarrassed and weak, the only way is to shout at them. You know, if you saw how you gonna get people to, it's not part of it. But I agree, actually, kind there's all kinds of questions about Orientalists. I'm trying to get a good question here. Yeah. Someone's asking about the method that was required, that each person in the beginning, in the early days, needed 2 Sahaba in order for the each ayah to be confirmed, which is true. No, the harf is not a specific way of reading the whole Quran. It's a specific way of reading one word. Yeah, it's not the whole Quran. It's one word. So it's a difference in one word, according to Tabari. It's a difference of one word rather than the whole Quran. It's saying that the Quran is not changed, even a single word. Yeah, it's not changed. Why is it changed? Why would you think that's the wrong thing to say? How is it changed? How's it corrupted? Nothing's been added to it and nothing's been taken from it, from the authorial intent. We don't believe in corruption. Sorry to say, corruption. The authorial intent. Allah intended this to be read in the prayers of the Muslims and to be bayna aidi al-Muslimin. This is what's going to be with the Muslims, and that's it. That's what is required. And we don't believe in the corruption of that. Some are saying, yes, totally understandable passion, brother. Some people need to wake up and educate themselves, and others need to shut up. Yeah, well, this is more, I believe. You're right. And sister Siham Jannati, inshallah, I think this is just on the haqq. Anyways, with that, guys, I think I need to pray a Maghrib prayer. Okay. Guys, do you know what I do? I'll be honest with you. I see if you're paying attention and if the attendees are leaving. If I do, I start moving it a bit, shaking the tree a bit, because sometimes I feel like people are not paying attention. But hopefully, you guys, go back on this webinar, even if I'm shouting or something, you know, or be speaking passionately, and just read through your notes. And if you understand it, good. No one can joke with you and no one can play with you. Believe me. Because anyone asks you now, how can you explain this variance as harf? How can you explain that variance harf? How can you explain this as harf? How can you explain this manuscript harf? How can you explain it possibly harf? Possibly, basically, it's gonna. You can jab them to death with this. And jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.